Hi, and welcome to Placebo, the podcast where my brother and I take turns teaching each other something about healthcare or medicine. I'm Kaylin Richards, and this is my brother.
And I'm Logan Richards.
All right, and how are you today, brother?
Wonderful.
Wonderful. You just said you were too tired because it was too late.
It's way too late.
It's 6:45 p.m.
Bedtime.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about cracking your joints.
Oh, I've heard of this before.
You've heard of cracking your joints? Okay, so this topic came up as a suggestion from Rachel, so thank you, Rachel. It kind of came up because it's a question that a lot of people have, I think. What is happening when you crack your joints? And also, is it bad for you?
Oh, yeah.
Because that's always a rumor that goes around.
That's what I usually hear.
So we're gonna answer those questions, and then I have a few other things we might talk about at the end on a related note.
Okay.
Okay? First, we're going to talk about what is actually happening when you, crack your joints.
Okay.
Do you know, what do you think is happening?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
Yes? Okay, great.
Well, what I've heard is that it has to do with a change in the volume of the joint space. So there's the noise comes from maybe the popping of bubbles. Basically, you have a joint capsule, and when you crack your joint, you are quickly changing the area of inside that joint capsule, the volume. And so that causes the fluid as well as maybe the air bubbles or something inside to change volume quickly as well, and that produces a noise.
Sort of, yes.
Okay.
But we'll get maybe more into details. First, I want to tell you what the medical term for cracking your joints is.
Okay.
It's joint cavitation.
Aha.
So you could just say that now. You're going to cavitate your joints.
Okay.
What I had thought before I researched this was similar to what you said, that it was bubbles or something popping in the joint. And that was a prior theory for about the last 25 years or so.
I'm working on old data.
That was a theory.
Oh.
But actually, one of the first studies about looking at what was happening when people were cracking their joints was in 1947.
Okay.
Okay, and it was by some researchers, Roaston and Haynes. Okay.
What were they wondering?
And they were wondering what was happening when people were cracking their joints.
Okay.
And so they did serial x-rays, just like one x-ray after the other, while distraction, which is like the joint is being pulled on and separated. That's distraction.
Okay, what joints were they looking at?
The MCP joints. Do you remember what that is?
Sure, of course.
And what is that?
Metacarpal, phalangeal
Yes.
joint, so that's this one?
So, in other words, your knuckle.
Your knuckle. But it's the knuckle that's closest to the rest of your hand.
Yeah, the kind of at the base of the finger knuckle.
Right.
So they did x-rays as they slowly provided distraction to the joint, pulled on the finger. Okay. And they noticed that the post-cracking, after there was the cracking sound, the x-ray would show that there was a space in the joint, like a clear space.
Okay.
And they assumed this was some sort of bubble or cavity that was formed because then that was the noise of the cracking, was this bubble being formed. Their theory was that maybe the pressure from the distraction, the pulling on the finger and changing the joint space, caused dissolved gases to come out of the fluid in the joint.
Oh, interesting.
Okay? And that was the bubble that was there that they saw. So that was the earliest study. Since
that was me. That was what I said.
Yeah. Then
I'm as current as a 1947 study.
Well, it's not that bad. You'll see. Then in 1971, there was another study, Unsworth et al.
Okay.
So they did a similar study technique where they just took serial x-rays. But then they came to a different conclusion. They believed that, based on what they were seeing, that the cracking sound was caused by the bubble, that they saw the same bubble, but they thought it was the bubble collapsing, and that was the cause of the sound. So kind of the opposite.
This is confusing.
I know,
bubbles
it's
can either
confusing.
make sound by appearing or disappearing.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think, to me, just intuitively, it feels like it makes sense that a bubble makes a noise when it pops, and less that it makes sense that a bubble makes a noise when it appears. But I don't know if that's just me.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true.
Okay, well, it's not. You'll see. So another hypothesis that researchers have proposed over the years, and that I saw actually in fairly recent articles that I was looking at, that people still thought was a like early 2000s that people still thought was the case was that ligaments were snapping back into position after they've been stretched out, and that was the cause.
Oh.
Nothing to do with bubbles at all. So you wouldn't think that this is a topic of current research, but it is. Because
course.
Who's
funding this research?
I'm not sure. Some Canadians.
Okay.
In April of 2015, there was...
That was recently.
Finally, just over a year ago.
Right.
There was finally conclusive evidence published.
Oh, really?
Of what's happening.
I'll be the judge of that.
So this study was published by Kachuk et al.
Okay.
And he's actually a physical therapist at the University of Alberta.
All right.
It was published in the journal PLOS1, which is an interesting journal. It's peer-reviewed research of like a wide variety of topics from what I can see.
Isn't that a reputable journal, though?
Oh, yeah, it is.
I recognize the name.
Yeah. So they used a technique to provide live, like real-time imaging during the cracking of the knuckle.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So it's called Cine MRI. I'm assuming the pronunciation CINE, like cinema.
Oh, that sounds cool.
Yeah. It's basically like regular MRI images, like a static MRI, not fMRI like our last one.
Yeah.
But taken really close together. They do, it said 3.2 per second.
So it looks like a video.
And then you can play it like a video, yeah.
Okay.
Because that's what film is, right? It's a bunch of pictures that are just played rapidly in succession.
Yes.
So they determined that it was actually pretty much what the first researchers, Roston and Haynes, in 1947 found.
Oh, really?
They were right.
The bubble's appearing.
The bubble is appearing. So it's called viscous adhesion, or if you want to be fancier than viscous adhesion.
That's already pretty fancy.
Yeah, you could call it tribonucleation.
Oh.
Same thing.
Okay.
It is where, let's see, there are two surfaces that are close together. So like the two opposing.
Is that the joint surfaces?
Yeah, so like the part of the joint by the hand and the part that's by the finger.
Okay.
Are close together.
Going back to our knuckle example.
Yeah, because it's what they did too.
Okay.
Are close together and they're separated by a thin layer of fluid, viscous fluid.
Right.
Which is the synovial fluid, the fluid in the joint.
Right.
And then when the surfaces are pulled apart, the pressure causes a vapor cavity to be formed.
Okay.
So
pressure change. That's what I said.
So yeah, I said basically. So it is a pressure change that causes dissolved gases to come out and be a bubble.
Okay, and the dissolved gases are within the synovial fluid.
They're
and
just
that's just the fluid that's in your joints that
the
lubricates the joints, makes them move.
So any joint that's a synovial joint in the human body could be popped or cracked.
Okay.
And so just to clarify, there are three types of joints. There's synovial joints, which is most every joint that you think of in your body. Right?
But it's not every joint.
Every joint that you can move, really.
Those are the classic joints.
Right. And then do you remember what the other type of joints are?
Fibrous.
Fibrous, that's the skull. So they're different bones joined together to make your skull, but they don't move. There's no give at all.
Right. And then there's cartilaginous.
And an example of that would be like between the ribs and like the sternum, the breastbone.
Okay.
So they can flex a little bit, but they're not a joint that you actively move.
Okay.
Okay. So in their study also with Kachuk et al.,
okay,
they saw that just to prove that the bubble popping is not what's really happening, not what's causing the sound, they saw that the bubble would just stay there until the distraction, the pulling on the finger, was released.
Okay. So they could hold it for as long as they wanted.
They didn't hold it for a long, long time because of the poor guy's finger.
Okay.
But whether they released it right away or then it would just go away, or if they held it, it would stay there. And if they let it go down and then pulled it back up, the bubble would be visible again when they pulled on the joint again. So it stays for a little while.
Okay.
And also they've seen in studies that it takes about 20 minutes before you can crack your joint again from when you did it one time.
Oh, interesting.
And that's probably how long it takes for all the gases to be redissolved into the fluid.
Okay.
Right.
That makes sense.
Okay.
How many people did they do their study on?
This study?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. One person.
Ooh, I don't like that.
Yeah. Most of these studies all were like very few people. Although
that's weird. How could they not even get like 20?
I don't know.
It was at a college. They could have just asked people to pop their finger.
I know. They repeated it a whole bunch of times. So you can assume, unless this guy is weird, that the anatomical process should
That's
be.
the point of that's the point of multiple people. He might be weird.
He might be weird. You can cast a little doubt on that.
Okay. Well, the reason I asked that was because you said they didn't pull on the guy's finger for very long.
I know.
And
the
so
guy.
it made me think, is there only one person?
Yeah. This cine MRI that they use seems to be a really specialized equipment.
Yeah, it sounds cool.
Because not all MRIs can just take all those rapid pictures.
Maybe they only had access to the equipment for one person.
Maybe. Because when I tried to research, like, how does a cine MRI works, because I just wanted to understand what it was.
Yeah.
It seems like it's pretty much exclusively used for, at least all the results that were coming up were used with Chiari malformation and cerebral spinal fluid flow in the brain. So, like, it's a very specialized use, apparently.
All right.
And so this was a first time this had ever been tried on the hand, anyways, that they'd ever used this equipment to show this.
Okay.
So that's what is happening when you crack your joints. A bubble is being formed.
A bubble is being formed.
Now, is it bad for you?
I say no.
You say no. Why do you say no? Just like it? Feel like it?
Well, that's interesting.
You don't want it to be bad for you? Do you crack your knuckles a lot? I don't.
No, I don't.
You crack it. I don't, because it hurts my hand to crack them. I don't like it.
But one thing that we have learned recently in school is manipulations in the spine.
I was going to ask if you'd learned about that. I have some research to talk about that.
Right. And I'm not sure. The whole research on manipulation seems to be kind of up in the air anyways. But one thing that they say is that an audible pop, like a crack of the joint, is
cavitation.
A cavitation is not necessarily required for the manipulation to be done correctly, but often produces, or at least helps to produce, a placebo effect, which is favorable.
Placebo.
So they say in class, at least, that while it's not required, it's often a better treatment if there's a pop of the joint, a cavitation.
Right. So I read that too. That's what studies were showing.
Which that seems reasonable, whether or not the spinal manipulation is doing whatever it's doing.
Yeah.
Creating that good treatment environment we've already been over already leads to better results. And it's not surprising that in this case, they probably do too.
Right. So I'm going to go back to the study that I mentioned from 1971, Unsworth et al.
Okay.
When they thought that the popping sound was caused by a bubble collapsing. So that was wrong.
So did they just see the wrong thing in the X-ray?
They saw the same thing. They just interpreted it differently.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because an X-ray, it's not real. I mean, even if they're taking a bunch of X-rays, it's not real time. It's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't give us as much of a view.
I wonder what the difference between the X-ray and the MRI are too, in terms of how well you can see the joint space and.
They did say with the cine MRI, they were a little bit limited because to be able to see what they wanted of the joint space and where the bubble is forming, they couldn't see a lot of depth to the image.
Oh.
So they can't see what's going on in other areas of the joint. But
okay.
So I want to get back onto, is it bad for you?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so I said no only because they teach it to us in school.
So, sort of. A large part of why they thought that it was bad came from this time in the 70s.
Okay.
Because cavitation collapse, where that bubble forms and then collapses, happens in... So they gave the specific example of marine equipment, like boat propellers.
Oh.
As they're running, that similar phenomenon can occur. And in the boat propellers, it caused significant damage.
Okay.
So they thought, well, it's a similar mechanism. Maybe it's causing damage to the joint surfaces.
So they're saying that as the propeller spins in the water, it creates a similar type of cavitation.
And it can...
And that causes damage to the propeller?
It can cause damage, yes.
Okay.
I couldn't tell if it was cavitation, like you said, in the water or cavitation in the internal workings of the propeller. It was not clear to me.
Okay, somewhere around the propeller, there's some cavitation, and then the propeller breaks.
So anyways, they could see in this mechanical model that damage was being caused, and they speculated that it was... maybe damage was being caused in people. Oh, and another additional fact is that the energy, the force that's put on the joint when you're doing distraction is quick. So it's kind of, you put pressure and it doesn't go for a little bit, and then it kind of gets to a threshold, and then the joint will just go far enough apart to cause that popping sound.
Okay.
And that energy that it takes and the force that it puts on the joint is thought to be significant, like past the threshold to what would cause damage to the joint normally. But to date anyways, studies have shown that there are not any differences in joints that are cracked a lot, like people that crack their fingers a lot, and people that don't, for example, in developing arthritis.
Okay. It seems like that's what people are usually worried about when they're like, when they ask the question that is cracking your knuckles good for you or not.
So, no arthritis difference. And actually, a study that I was looking at with osteoarthritis in fingers saw that the people that did crack their knuckles actually had a slightly lower rate of osteoarthritis than the people that did, but it wasn't enough to be significant. But
that's interesting because we know that movement lowers your risk for osteoarthritis, kind of just...
Maybe you're moving a lot?
Yeah, and it's kind of like movement, right? You're moving that synovial fluid around.
There have been studies that do show that people that crack their hand, like their knuckles a lot, do have decreased grip strength slightly and increased soft tissue swelling in people that habitually are cracking their knuckles all the time, which makes sense because if you keep pulling on the soft tissues and stretching the finger out, maybe that causes some edema in there.
That seems reasonable.
But not translating to long-term arthritic damage. So I guess, that's so far studies would suggest that we're not the same as boat propellers. And
that already, but boat propellers are made out of like metal or something, right? So
well, they're meant to be pretty hardy though.
Our bodies are not.
No.
But I would say the boat propeller is probably very rigid, so I wonder if it reacts differently to a quick change in pressure like that than our stretchy body tissues.
Yeah, I don't know. What has been shown is that there doesn't seem to be any negative effects as far as arthritis. You might have weaker hands if you're worried about a slightly weaker grasp, but you won't have...
The hands are really so fragile, it seems like. They're just the way that the tendons go through them and all the little pulleys and loops that have to be working, like... I guess it's not surprising to me that if you're always pulling on them...
Things might get stretched out and not maybe... You don't maybe have as good a strength.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's our conclusion here with is it bad to you? Is it bad for you?
I don't think, not really.
There doesn't seem to be a lot of evidence either way, it sounds like. It's probably not good for you either.
Yeah, I don't think it's doing anything positive for you. Now, here's the thing, right? People will say, I just have to crack my joints or whatever. I have to crack my knuckles. I have to crack my back. When they just feel like they have to. I have literally never experienced that. Have you ever experienced that?
No, I think that it builds though. I mean, they've taught us in school that there is a significant, I'm forgetting the right word, like neuropsychological portion to joint manipulations. Like
psychosomatic? Psychoneuro, like where you think that this is going to give you relief from the problem, and so it does.
Yeah, I think that could be part of it.
Maybe.
I wonder, too, you said there was increased, swelling, so I wonder if they just, because of chronic joint cracking, you have more gas in your synovial fluid, and so then that creates pressure. I don't know. So what it sounds like you're saying to me is that the research is just super inconclusive on all of this. That the one that you told me was conclusive on what actually happens.
Yeah.
Used a type of imaging device that we're not quite sure how it works. They did it only on one person.
They did.
Which for me, how is that even studied? That's almost worthless data. So it seems like all we can say is that cracking your joints has something to do with the pressure change inside the
it does have something to do.
Inside the joint capsule within the synovial fluid. And that research has shown that long-term, chronic joint cracking doesn't lead to an increase in osteoarthritis.
That's what we've got.
But that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So I guess what I would like to say to wrap up then is that when it was suggested to do this topic, I kind of thought, it's probably not got a lot of current research. It's probably something that's just straightforward and this is what it is. But yet again, I'm surprised by how much current research and how much is unknown by a topic that you really would think would have been figured out by now. Because on the face of it, it's pretty simple, but it's just not.
Pretty much at the end now, we still have no idea.
Oh, no, we know some things. It's a bubble being formed, not popping.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so if you enjoyed the episode, you could please share us with a friend or give us a rating on iTunes.
You can visit our website, placebopodcast.com, for show notes or to send us any suggestions or feedback. We love suggestions or feedback.
Yes. Thank you again to Rachel for suggesting this topic. You can also find us on Facebook.
Thank you to James Aiken for our music.
And thank you to you for listening. We'll be back with a new episode next week.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
The lead author had the last name of Kachuk.
I wanted to say his full name, but I didn't write it down.